There was a schoolyard, a clubhouse, and a gang of kids whose laughter echoed through Depression-era America and never quite stopped. Every week, millions gathered to watch Spanky, Alfalfa, Darla, and Buckwheat stumble through childhood with a sincerity so pure it made the world feel manageable. No superheroes, no special effects, just kids being kids in a way that felt impossibly real. But the actors who built that world were real people, and real life, as it always does, had its own plans for them. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where you are watching from and what was your favorite Little Rascals memory. And if you love classic Hollywood, forgotten stories, and emotional journeys like this, make sure you subscribe now. Now, let's step back into the golden age of cinema, where 15 children became legends, and tragedy followed far too many of them home. Number 1. Norman Chubby Cheney. Norman Chubby Cheney was 14 years old when Hal Roach cast him as the replacement for Joe Cobb, though the studio publicly claimed he was only 9. The deception was necessary because Norman was already larger than most kids his age, standing 3 feet 11 inches and weighing 113 pounds, but his expressive face and natural comic timing made him impossible to ignore. He actually won the role by beating out more than 20,000 other children in a nationwide search, and on screen he became exactly what the series needed. He was just a lovable, gentle kid whose slow burn reactions could steal a scene without saying a single word. Norman appeared in 18 Our Gang shorts between 1929 and 1931, entering the series just as sound arrived and completely transforming it with his voice. His trademark was borrowed directly from silent film legends Oliver Hardy and Edgar Kennedy, who taught him the art of the exasperated double take. He played opposite Jackie Cooper in some of the most memorable early sound entries, including Love Business, where he delivered the immortal line, "Don't call me Norman, call me Chubsy Ubsy." Audiences absolutely adored him. But by the spring of 1931, Norman was growing too tall and too heavy to continue. The studio chose not to renew his contract, and Norman's family made the decision to take him home to Baltimore. He returned to public school and tried to live a normal life, but the adjustment proved difficult. His grades, which were once excellent on set, declined sharply. The attention stopped, the fan mail disappeared, and his weight just continued to climb. By 1935, Norman weighed nearly 300 pounds. Doctors at Johns Hopkins Hospital diagnosed him with a glandular disorder and recommended surgery. Norman underwent the procedure, and for a brief time, it actually seemed to work. His weight dropped dramatically to 136 pounds, and then even further down to 110. But that rapid loss completely devastated his body. His heart, strained by years of carrying excessive weight and then shocked by its sudden removal, simply began to fail. On May 29, 1936, Norman Myers Cheney died of myocarditis at his family home in Baltimore. He was only 21 years old, making him the very first member of our gang to die. His mother, already struggling financially, could not afford a headstone. Norman was buried in an unmarked grave at Baltimore Cemetery, where he remained forgotten for 76 years. In 2012, Detroit rock musician McCall launched an online fundraising campaign and raised $4,500 to finally place markers on the graves of both Norman and his mother, Carolyn. On November 10, 2012, the black granite headstones were unveiled, and fans still visit them today. Norman Cheney's legacy is not measured in wealth or fame. It is measured in those 18 shorts where a kid from Baltimore made millions of people smile, where his timing was flawless, and where his presence reminded everyone that kindness and humor do not require cruelty. He died too young and was forgotten for too long, but he is remembered now by people who never knew him and never will. Number 2, Jackie Cooper. Jackie Cooper was 7 years old when he joined our gang in 1929, arriving in the same breath as sound itself. He had already been working as an extra alongside his grandmother, with both of them hired for the price of one, but it was director Leo McCarey who saw something singular in the boy's face and recommended him to Hal Roach. Jackie signed a 3-year contract after appearing in the short Boxing Gloves, and within months he had become one of the series' major characters, replacing Harry Spear as the leading child actor. Jackie appeared in 15 Our Gang shorts between 1929 and 1931. He was the kid with the expressive eyes and the capacity to cry on cue, which was a skill that would define much of his early career. His performance in the first 7 years and When the Wind Blows showcased a naturalism that other child actors struggled to match. He wasn't performing childhood, he was actually living it, and audiences responded with overwhelming affection. But Jackie's talent outgrew our gang almost immediately. In 1931, at just 9 years old, he became the youngest actor ever nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actor, earning the honor for his role in Skippy. The same year, he appeared opposite Wallace Beery in The Champ, delivering a performance so heartbreaking that it cemented his status as one of Hollywood's most bankable child stars. He left our gang behind and moved into feature films full-time, working steadily throughout the 1930s in movies like The Devil is a Sissy and Peck's Bad Boy. Jackie's career didn't end when he grew up. During World War II, he served in the U.S. Navy and remained in the Naval Reserve for decades, eventually retiring with the rank of captain. He transitioned seamlessly into television, starring in two successful sitcoms called The People's Choice and Hennessy. But it was behind the camera where Jackie found his most enduring success. He became an Emmy-winning director, helming episodes of MASH and The White Shadow, and proving that his understanding of performance extended far beyond his own. Later audiences knew him best as Perry White, the gruff newspaper editor in 4 Superman films beginning in 1978, a role he played with the same grounded integrity that defined his childhood work. He appeared opposite Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder, and even decades removed from our gang, his presence carried weight. Jackie Cooper died on May 3, 2011, at the age of 88 in Santa Monica, California. He collapsed at home and was rushed to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead of a heart attack. He outlived both his daughters and his wife, Barbara Ray Krause, but was survived by his 2 sons. He was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery, which was a recognition of his decades of service to the Navy. Jackie Cooper's life was the exception, not the rule. He survived child stardom, built a second career, served his country, and died surrounded by family at an age most people would consider a blessing. His net worth at the time of his death was estimated at several $millions. But what he left behind that matters more is a body of work that spans 60 years, and a reminder that sometimes the story does have a happy ending. Number 3. Dorothy DeBorba, Dorothy Echo. Dorothy DeBorba was only 5 years old when she absolutely blew Hal Roach away with a single extraordinary skill, and that was her ability to cry right on cue. That talent quickly landed her a screen test, a contract, and a permanent spot in our gang history as one of the most lovable leading ladies the series ever had. She made her big debut in 1930's Pups is Pups, where she played Jackie Cooper's younger sister, and she immediately won over audiences with her signature curls, massive hair bows, and an incredible energy that felt less like acting and a lot more like controlled chaos. Dorothy went on to appear in 24 Our Gang shorts between 1930 and 1933. Her mother actually spent 2 hours every single night brushing her hair, putting it up in curlers, and crafting those famous bows by hand just to make sure Dorothy looked absolutely flawless on screen. But honestly, her real appeal had nothing to do with being perfectly groomed. She was mischievous, incredibly sharp-tongued, and completely fearless in front of the camera. In her early shorts, she often played Norman Chubby Cheney's little sister, and she had this habit of mimicking his lines with these clever little twists. That habit actually earned her the nickname Echo on set, even though that name never actually showed up on screen. One of her absolute best moments happened in a short where Chubby dramatically declared, "My heart is filled with joy. I want to trip and dance." Dorothy, without missing a single beat, fired back with, "My heart is filled with joy. I want to rip my pants." The entire crew just dissolved into laughter, and the director loved it so much that the take stayed in the final cut. Dorothy's run with our gang wrapped up in 1933 with the short Mush and Milk when she was just 8 years old. Director Robert McGowan actually advised her mother to hold off on chasing feature films, suggesting it would be better to let Dorothy just grow up into a young woman before trying to tackle Hollywood again. Hal Roach did give her a tiny scene in Bombshell alongside Jean Harlow, but after that, Dorothy walked away from acting for good. She went right back to a normal childhood, attended Van Nuys High School, and eventually graduated without any crazy Hollywood fanfare. As an adult, Dorothy worked as a secretary over at Republic Pictures and later became a senior clerk in the School of Journalism at the University of California, Berkeley. She got married twice, raised 2 kids, and lived a pretty quiet life away from the spotlight for decades. But then in 1980, she joined the Sons of the Desert, which is the Laurel and Hardy Appreciation Society, and she became a regular face at all the conventions and reunions. She loved attending those events, reconnecting with her old castmates, and meeting generations of fans who grew up watching her on TV. In the late 1970s, Dorothy was diagnosed with emphysema, which is a chronic lung condition that unfortunately got worse as the years went on. She still pushed through and attended reunions for as long as her health would let her, but by 2010, traveling just became too much. She was actually planning to attend the International Convention in Sacramento when her health took a final turn for the worse. Dorothy DeBorba passed away on June 2, 2010, at the age of 85 in Walnut Creek, California. She died in the hospital from complications related to her emphysema, and her daughter, Janet Moorhead, later confirmed the news. There wasn't a public service held, but Dorothy left behind her son, Richard Haberreiter, her daughter, and thousands of fans across the world who still remember that sharp-tongued little girl with the big curls who made everyone laugh nearly 80 years ago. Number 4. Matthew Stee Beard Jr. Stymie Matthew Stymie Beard was only 5 years old when director Robert McGowan spotted him during a casting call in the summer of 1930. Hal Roach Studios had already auditioned 350 boys to replace Alan Farina Hoskins, and McGowan was honestly running out of patience. Then Matthew walked onto the stage and looked around with those enormous expressive eyes, and McGowan just hired him on the spot without a screen test because the boy had something no audition could ever measure: presence. Matthew appeared in 36 Our Gang shorts between 1930 and 1935, quickly becoming one of the most beloved members of the whole series. His character, Stymie, was nothing like the child actors who came before him. He was slick-tongued, self-assured, totally nonchalant, and always ready with a sly comment or a clever solution to whatever problem the gang faced. He wore an oversized derby hat that was actually a gift from comedian Stan Laurel, and it became as much a part of his identity as his voice. McGowan later said that Stymie was his absolute favorite of all the Our Gang kids, and you could really see it in the screen time and storylines he received. Stymie's most famous moment came when he tried an artichoke for the first time, munching on the whole leaves instead of just the tips. He jerked his head in that trademark double take, the derby shifting slightly on his head, and delivered the line, "Might have choked Artie, but it sure ain't gonna choke Stymie." The timing was just flawless, and the moment became total legend. Matthew's paycheck supported a massive family of 14 children in East Los Angeles. His parents actually allowed him to name his siblings as they were born, and he even named one after Dicky Moore, who was his best friend in the gang. 4 of his family members appeared in our gang shorts right alongside him, including his younger brother Bobby, who played a character named Cotton. Matthew left our gang in 1935 at age 10. He appeared in supporting roles in films like Captain Blood and Jezebel, and at 15 he played Mose the Bellboy in The Return of Frank James, but as he grew older, the roles just dried up. By 18, struggling with a marijuana habit, he was arrested for theft. His life spiraled into addiction and street life, which was the kind of descent that seemed inevitable for far too many child stars back then. In 1966, Matthew entered Synanon, a California recovery program, and finally began to turn his life around. In the 1970s, he made appearances at Our Gang reunions and spoke openly to kids about the dangers of drug abuse. He even returned to acting with small roles in The Buddy Holly Story and guest spots on Good Times, Maude, and Sanford and Son. His final role was as a bawdy house pianist in the 1981 miniseries East of Eden. On January 3, 1981, just 2 days after his 56th birthday, Matthew suffered a stroke in the motel room where he was living. He was found 2 days later, alive but paralyzed, and was rushed to County USC Medical Center where he died on January 8, 1981, from pneumonia and complications. He was 56 years old. Matthew Stymie Beard was buried at Evergreen Cemetery in Los Angeles, with the famous derby that he had kept for his entire life resting right beside him. He left behind a legacy that had absolutely nothing to do with the struggles that marked his adult years, and everything to do with a kid in an oversized hat who just made people laugh. Number 5. George Spanky McFarland. Spanky George Spanky McFarland was 3 years old when he became a Hollywood legend. His Aunt Dottie had sent his photograph to Hal Roach Studios in response to a trade magazine ad requesting pictures of cute kids, and the studio invited him for a screen test in the spring of 1931. During that test, the little boy from Dallas was supposed to sit quietly in a wagon while the veteran Rascals did the acting. But instead, Sonny, as his family called him, launched into a long, rambling monologue about a monkey. The cameras kept rolling and a star was born. Spanky appeared in 95 Our Gang shorts across 11 years, from 1931 to 1942, making him the longest-serving and most recognizable member of the Sound Era cast. His character evolved from an outspoken toddler grumpily tagging along with the gang into the de facto leader of the group by 1935, often paired with Carl Alfalfa Switzer. Spanky was the idea man, the organizer, and the kid who always had a plan even when the plan made no sense. He wore a floppy beanie and oversized checkered knickers, and his round face became the visual shorthand for the entire franchise. Spanky's only starring feature film was 1936's General Spanky, which was an unsuccessful attempt by Hal Roach to move our gang into feature-length productions. The film flopped, but Spanky himself remained untouchable. He also appeared in major studio features like Kentucky Colonels and The Trail of the Lonesome Pine, working alongside stars like Fred MacMurray and Henry Fonda. His scene-stealing abilities were so pronounced that Carl Switzer's father and Spanky's father fought constantly over screen time and billing for their sons. Spanky's relationship with the series ended in 1942 when he aged out of the role. After leaving our gang, he struggled to find work as a teenager and eventually received a hardship discharge from the Air Force. He flipped hamburgers, worked odd jobs, and drifted through the late 1940s and 1950s with no clear direction until 1966, when he joined Philco Ford and began a successful career in sales that would define his adult life far more than acting ever did. But Spanky never fully left the past behind. He made guest appearances on college campuses, talking about his days as a child star, and appeared in occasional cameo roles on television, including a 1993 walk-on in Cheers. He helped launch the Nostalgia Channel in Texas in 1985 and participated in numerous charity golf tournaments. Michael Jackson even stayed in Spanky's home during his 1984 Dallas tour just to spend time with him, because the affection was real, decades after the cameras stopped. On June 30, 1993, Spanky collapsed in his bedroom in Grapevine, Texas, while getting dressed. Paramedics worked on him for 30 minutes before transporting him to Baylor University Medical Center, but he was pronounced dead at 2:03 p.m. at the age of 64. The cause was a heart attack or an aneurysm, and his remains were cremated. A cenotaph was approved for placement at Texas State Cemetery in Austin, though it has yet to be installed. George Spanky McFarland left behind a wife, a son, a daughter, several grandchildren, and a legacy that no other Our Gang member could match. He was the face of the franchise, the most famous, the most enduring, and the one everyone remembered first. Number 6. Dicky Moore. Dicky Moore was 6 years old when he joined our gang back in 1932, and the crazy thing is, he was already a veteran of the silent era. He actually made his film debut at just 1 year old in The Beloved Rogue opposite John Barrymore, so by the time Hal Roach cast him, he had already appeared in dozens of films. He played Dicky in 8 Our Gang shorts during the 1932-33 season, often serving as the leader of the gang before Spanky fully took over that role. He was just sharp, quick, and completely comfortable on camera, in a way that most child actors never really achieved. Dicky appeared in shorts like Birthday Blues alongside Stymie and Spanky, quickly establishing himself as one of the series' most reliable performers. But Our Gang was never going to be enough for a talent like Dicky Moore. He left after just 1 year to pursue feature films, and what followed was one of the most successful child acting careers in Hollywood history. He played the title role in the 1933 adaptation of Oliver Twist, appeared as Marlene Dietrich's son in Blonde Venus, and even starred in Man's Castle with Spencer Tracy. He worked opposite Joan Crawford in The Bride Wore Red and gave Shirley Temple what was believed to be her first on-screen kiss in Miss Annie Rooney. Dicky appeared in over 100 films before his teenage years, working right alongside some of the biggest stars of the era. In 1941, he played the little brother of Alvin York in Sergeant York, starring Gary Cooper. Then in 1943, he appeared in Heaven Can Wait, and by 1947, he was playing Robert Mitchum's deaf young assistant in the film noir classic Out of the Past. His final film role came in 1952 in the adaptation of Carson McCullers' The Member of the Wedding. Dicky Moore served in the U.S. Army during World War II, and when he returned, he made the big decision that would define his adult life because he chose to walk away from acting forever. He graduated from college in 1951 with a degree in theater arts and immediately moved into work behind the scenes, eventually founding his own public relations firm called Dick Moore Associates. He worked for Actors Equity for years before starting that company, and he spent decades representing clients and building a successful career that had absolutely nothing to do with being in front of the camera. Dicky married Jane Powell, the famous musical actress known for Seven Brides for Seven Brothers and Royal Wedding. They remained together for years, and when he passed, he was survived by her, a son named Kevin, and his sister, the legendary Hollywood publicist Pat Kingsley. His long, successful, and turmoil-free life stood in stark contrast to the countless stories of child actors whose lives completely crumbled into disarray after their stars dimmed. Turner Classic Movies noted this explicitly in his biography, calling his post-Hollywood life a model of stability and reinvention. In his later years, Dicky battled dementia and declining health. On September 7, 2015, just 5 days before his 90th birthday, he died at a hospice in Wilton, Connecticut. He was 89 years old. His colleagues had really hoped he would make it to that 90-year milestone, but it was not to be, and he was cremated shortly after. Dicky Moore left behind a legacy that stretched all the way from the silent era to the 1950s, leaving us a body of work that included more than 100 films, and a life lived with dignity, grace, and an understanding that fame was something you could just walk away from. Number 7. Scotty Beckett. Scotty Beckett was only 3 years old when a casting director noticed him entertaining his father at Cedars of Lebanon Hospital in Los Angeles. His father was actually recovering from an illness, and little Scotty was just doing what came naturally to him by performing, charming everyone, and making people smile. The casting director ended up arranging an audition, and in 1933, Scotty landed a role in Gallant Lady, opposite Dicky Moore. Sadly, that very same year, his father passed away, which meant Hollywood basically became the only world Scotty ever really knew. Scotty joined our gang in 1934, appearing in 15 shorts between that year and 1935. Honestly, he was one of the cutest kids the series ever produced, with those enormous eyes, a crooked backwards baseball cap, and a natural ease in front of the camera that made him an absolute scene stealer. He worked right alongside Spanky, Alfalfa, and the rest of the gang during one of the series' most beloved periods, but just like Dicky Moore before him, Scotty's talent outgrew the shorts almost immediately. He left our gang in 1935 to pursue feature films, and what followed was a truly remarkable run. He appeared in Dante's Inferno, Anthony Adverse, The Charge of the Light Brigade, Conquest, Marie Antoinette, and King's Row. He even played the young Al Jolson in The Jolson Story back in 1946, which was a performance that really cemented his place as one of Hollywood's most reliable young actors. He worked steadily all through his teenage years, appearing in dozens of films, and he honestly seemed destined for a long, great career. But then Scotty struggled to transition into adult roles, and the work just dried up. The studios that had once fought for him completely stopped calling. He married twice, with both marriages ending in divorce, and he drifted through a series of dead-end jobs. At one point, he even studied to become a doctor but never finished, eventually settling for driving an ambulance. His behavior became increasingly erratic, heavily fueled by alcohol and prescription drugs, which led to multiple brushes with the law and arrests for public intoxication, disorderly conduct, and worse. In 1962, during the absolute depths of his drinking, Scotty attempted suicide, but he survived. Then, in 1968, he was badly beaten under circumstances that were never fully explained. Some reports placed the incident over in Mexico, while others suggested it happened in California over a drug deal gone wrong. The details are still pretty unclear, but the injuries themselves were severe. On May 8, 1968, Scotty checked himself into a Hollywood nursing home for treatment, but just 2 days later, on May 10th, he was found dead in his room. Sleeping pills and a note were discovered right near his body, but the coroner ruled the cause of death as inconclusive. The official reports listed it as complications from the beating alongside a possible barbiturate overdose. It was widely believed to be his third suicide attempt, and this time he succeeded. He was only 38 years old. Scotty Beckett was buried at San Fernando Mission Cemetery, leaving behind a son from his second marriage, and a legacy that now exists almost entirely on film. The charming boy with the backwards cap, the kid who made millions of people smile, ultimately became one of Hollywood's saddest cautionary tales. His story is a heavy reminder that childhood fame rarely comes without a price, and sometimes that price is everything. Number 8.
Billy Buckwheat Thomas. Buckwheat Billy Thomas was 3 years old when he first appeared in our gang shorts in 1934, playing small background roles in films like
For Pete's Sake
and The First Roundup. The character of Buckwheat had already existed in the series, originally played by Carlena Beard, Matthew Beard's younger sister, as a girl.
When Carlena left, Billy took over the role, and in 1935, Buckwheat transformed from a female character into a boy. The pigtails remained for a while, along with the oversized sweater and boots, but by 1940, Buckwheat had evolved into something else entirely. He became an archetypal kid with a speech impediment and a catchphrase that would define him forever. Billy appeared in 89 Our Gang shorts across 10 years, from 1934 to 1944, making him one of the longest-serving members of the Sound Era cast. His character was known for garbled dialogue that reflected Billy's genuine childhood speech issues, and for the phrase, "Ote," which he borrowed from Eugene Porky Lee, but made his own. Buckwheat was Spanky's sidekick, Alfalfa's friend, and the kid who was always there, always loyal, always part of the gang. He appeared in nearly every short from his debut, until the series ended in 1944, becoming one of the most recognizable faces in the franchise. Billy's character has been the subject of controversy in later years, criticized for containing elements of outdated racial stereotypes. But Billy himself defended his work throughout his life, pointing out that Buckwheat and the other black children in our gang were treated as equals to the white kids in the series. They played together, solved problems together, and appeared on screen as friends rather than caricatures. In the context of the Jim Crow era, that representation, however imperfect, was rare. When our gang ended in 1944, Billy walked away from Hollywood. He served in the United States Army from 1954 to 1956, earning both a National Defense Service Medal and a Good Conduct Medal. After his discharge, he was offered new acting roles, but rejected them all. He viewed an acting career as a rat race with no security and chose instead to work as a film lab technician for the Technicolor Corporation. He built a quiet, stable life far from the cameras, married, and had a son, William Thomas Jr. In the summer of 1980, Billy attended the second annual meeting of the Sons of the Desert, a fraternal organization named after a Laurel and Hardy film. Surviving Our Gang cast members gathered at the Los Angeles Hilton Hotel for the reunion, and when Billy was introduced, 500 fans gave him a spontaneous standing ovation. He cried in response. It was one of the last times he appeared in public. On October 10, 1980, exactly 46 years to the day after his mother first brought him to audition at Hal Roach Studios, Billy Thomas suffered a heart attack in his Los Angeles apartment. A neighbor found him several days later. He was 49 years old. He was buried at Inglewood Park Cemetery in Inglewood, California. Billy Buckwheat Thomas left behind a son, a legacy that spanned a decade of American film history, and a character that remains one of the most enduring images of childhood in cinema. George Spanky McFarland later said that Buckwheat's death broke his heart, and many believe that grief contributed to his own decline. Number 9, Carl Alfalfa Switzer. Alfalfa Carl Switzer was 6 years old when he and his older brother Harold crashed the Hal Roach Studio cafeteria in 1934 and just began an impromptu singing performance. The boys had been visiting relatives in California and decided to try their luck without an invitation or a pass, but producer Hal Roach was right there watching, and he signed both brothers on the spot. Harold was given the nicknames Slim and Deadpan, while Carl was dubbed Alfalfa. Within a year, Alfalfa had become one of the main characters, while Harold faded into the background. Carl appeared in 61 Our Gang shorts between 1935 and 1940, making him one of the most iconic members of the franchise. His character was defined by three things: a distinctive cowlick hairstyle that stuck straight up, an off-key singing voice that turned romantic ballads into comedy gold, and a rivalry with Butch for the affections of Darla. Alfalfa's attempts to croon like Bing Crosby, delivered in a voice that cracked and squeaked unpredictably, became some of the most memorable moments in the series. By 1937, Alfalfa had surpassed even Spanky in popularity, though their father's constant fighting over screen time and billing created tension on set. Carl's best friend among the cast was Tommy Bond, who played his on-screen nemesis Butch. In Bond's words, they became close because neither of us could replace the others. Carl left our gang in 1940 when he was 12, and his post-Hollywood life became a slow unraveling. He appeared in supporting roles in films like Going My Way, It's a Wonderful Life, and The Defiant Ones, but the parts were small and the paychecks smaller. He worked as a bartender, a hunting guide, and a dog trainer, struggling to make ends meet. Carl married Diane Collingwood in the early 1950s. They had one son together, but the marriage lasted only 4 months. His ex-wife remarried and raised their son without ever telling him who his real father was. In January 1958, Carl was shot and wounded by an unknown assailant who was never caught, and just a year later, another shooting would end his life. In early 1959, Carl brought a dog belonging to Moses Bud Stilts on a hunting trip. The dog ran off, and a rancher found it and demanded $50 for its return. Carl paid the reward and bought the man drinks at a bar, spending an additional $15. Later on, Carl decided that Stilts should reimburse him the full $50. On January 21, 1959, Carl and his friend Jack Piat went to Stilts' home at 10400 Columbus Avenue in Mission Hills, California, to collect the debt. What happened next is disputed. Stilts claimed that Carl hit him on the head with a clock, that they struggled over a gun, and that Carl drew a knife and yelled, "I'm going to kill you!" Stilts shot him in the groin, severing an artery. Carl Switzer was pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital at 7:27 p.m. He was 31 years old. A jury ruled the shooting justifiable homicide. Stilts' stepson, Tom Corrigan, later claimed his stepfather lied and that it was murder, but by then Stilts had died. The truth went with him. Carl Alfalfa Switzer was buried at Hollywood Forever Cemetery on January 27, 1959, leaving behind a legacy built on a cowlick, a voice, and a childhood that America never forgot. Number 10. Darla Hood. Darla Hood was only 4 years old when casting director Joe Rivkin spotted her in New York City. Her mother had taken her there all the way from their home in Leedy, Oklahoma, just hoping to find some opportunities for the little girl who had been singing and dancing since before she could even remember. Rivkin ended up arranging a screen test with Hal Roach, and Darla was hired right on the spot. She made her big debut in 1935's Our Gang Follies of 1936, where she played a character named Cookie. After that project, she started using her real name, and Darla quickly became the leading lady of Our Gang for the next 6 years. Darla appeared in 51 Our Gang shorts between 1935 and 1941, which made her the most prominent female character in the entire sound era. She was the iconic girl Alfalfa sang to, the main object of Butch's rivalry, and occasionally she even caught Waldo's affection. Her most memorable moment came in The Pinch Singer, where she sang "I'm in the Mood for Love," with a sweetness that made audiences completely forget they were watching a comedy. Darla was coquettish, charming, and totally comfortable in front of the camera because she could sing, she could act, and she carried herself with a confidence that honestly belied her age. But away from the camera, her life on set was a lot lonelier than it appeared. The boys tended to group together to play baseball or football between takes, which left Darla to entertain herself most of the time. She later admitted that she was actually afraid of Alfalfa at times, though she did have a bit of a crush on Spanky. Hal Roach was incredibly generous to her, and he even gifted her a full-size playhouse to play in when all she had originals for was a simple dollhouse. She finally left Our Gang in 1941 at the age of 10, making her final appearance in Wedding Worries because she had simply outgrown the role. After leaving the series, Darla graduated with honors from Fairfax High School in Hollywood and formed a vocal group called Darla Hood and the Enchanters, with 4 boys. The group worked with producer Ken Murray's famous Blackout stage show, and they provided background music for films. Darla married twice, first to Robert Decker in 1949, which was a marriage that lasted 8 years and produced 2 children. Then in 1957, she married a music publisher named Jose Granson, and they had 1 more child together. Her second husband unfortunately used a wheelchair following a stroke, and their marriage was often described as difficult. Darla built a solid career as a singer to nightclubs, performing at the Coconut Grove in Los Angeles, the Copacabana in New York, and the Sahara Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. She also did voiceover work for television commercials, including Campbell's Soup and Chicken of the Sea Tuna, where she was the famous voice of the mermaid. In 1979, she voiced Spanky and Porky's mother in the Little Rascals Christmas special, which was a role she never actually lived to see televised. In mid-1979, Darla was organizing a 1980 reunion of the Little Rascals cast members when she went to Canoga Park Hospital for a routine appendectomy. During the procedure, she received a blood transfusion, but the blood was tragically contaminated with hepatitis. On June 13, 1979, Darla Hood died of heart failure caused by acute hepatitis when she was just 47 years old. An autopsy later confirmed that the contaminated transfusion is what killed her. Billy Buckwheat, Thomas said, "I hate to hear it. It's a shock. She was an awfully nice person." He passed away the following year, and Spanky later said that Buckwheat honestly died of a broken heart over losing Darla. She was buried at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, leaving behind 3 children and a legacy that made her the face of every little girl who ever appeared in Our Gang. Number 11, Eugene Porky Lee. Porky Eugene Lee was 18 months old when his mother sent his photograph to Hal Roach Studios. Producer Hal Roach noted how much the toddler from Fort Worth, Texas, looked like George Spanky McFarland, who was also from Texas, and invited the Lee family to California. Eugene was nicknamed Porky by the studio and cast as Spanky's little brother. He appeared in his first short, Little Sinner, in 1935 at the age of 3, and he ended up remaining with the series for the next 4 years. Porky appeared in 42 Our Gang shorts between 1935 and 1939. His character was defined by a chubby-cheeked appearance, a speech impediment that made his dialogue adorably garbled, and the catchphrase, "Okay!" which he originated, though it is commonly attributed to Buckwheat. Porky and Buckwheat were best friends both on screen and off, and together they formed one of the most endearing partnerships in the series. Eugene, Spanky, Alfalfa, Buckwheat, and Darla constituted what is today the most familiar incarnation of our gang. By early 1939, Eugene had grown several inches in height, to the point that the 5-year-old was the same height as 10-year-old Spanky. MGM, which had taken over production of the series from Hal Roach, replaced him with Mickey Gubitosi, later known as Robert Blake. Eugene's time in our gang ended with the short Auto Antics, filmed in May 1939 when he was just 6 years old, and his acting career was over. Eugene returned to a normal childhood and entered public school, but he really struggled with the transition. He had been a star receiving fan mail, and then suddenly the letters stopped coming, and he later said it was difficult to adjust to being just another kid. As an adult, he changed his name to Gordon Lee, naming himself after his favorite Our Gang director, Gordon Douglas, to avoid any association with his former acting career, and he became a history teacher, working in Texas and Colorado for decades. For years, Eugene avoided reconnecting with his Our Gang past. But in the early 1980s, as the shorts gained renewed popularity on television, he began attending reunions and fan conventions. In 1992, he founded Ote Products, a company that sold Porky-themed merchandise including t-shirts, videos, and autographed photos. He reunited with surviving castmates like Spanky and Tommy Bond, sharing stories from the Hal Roach Studios era, and he was known to tell fans, "We are relics of history." In March 1984, Eugene sued Hanna-Barbera Productions for nearly $2 million, claiming that the animated character of Porky in their Little Rascals cartoon series was a complete copy of the original. The case was believed to be settled out of court, and some speculate the lawsuit contributed to the show's cancellation. After retiring from teaching, Eugene moved to Minnesota to be closer to his son, Douglas. He shared a home with his partner of 13 years, Janice McLean, and spent his time restoring European sports cars. In 2004, he was diagnosed with lung cancer, which later metastasized to his brain. On October 16, 2005, 9 days before his 72nd birthday, Eugene Porky Lee died at a Minneapolis nursing home. He outlived many of his Our Gang co-stars, including his friend Tommy Bond, who had passed away just 1 month earlier. Number 12. Tommy Bond. Butch Tommy Bond was only 5 years old when a talent scout for Hal Roach Studios approached him on a Dallas street as he walked with his mother back in 1931. The scout saw something special in the boy's face, something sharp and memorable, so he arranged a meeting with Hal Roach himself out in Los Angeles. Tommy was hired for the Our Gang series that very summer and started working in the fall of 1931, which was around the same time George Spanky McFarland joined the cast. He appeared as Tommy, a supporting character and background player, for 3 years before his contract expired and the studio chose not to renew it. Tommy worked in other films during his time away from Our Gang, appearing in shorts with Charlie Chase and Laurel and Hardy, while building a solid reputation as a reliable juvenile actor. Then, in late 1936, Hal Roach brought him back to play a brand new character, Butch, the neighborhood bully. His first short as Butch was Glove Taps, and in the film Practical Jokers, his mother actually calls him Tommy, which suggests that Butch was merely a nickname. Tommy appeared in 27 Our Gang shorts total, with 13 appearances as Tommy and 15 as Butch, making him one of the most enduring presences in the entire series. Butch was the archetypal bully, the kid with the protruding lip who gave Alfalfa endless grief and constantly competed with him for Darla's affections. But in reality, Tommy Bond was nothing like his character. Offset, he was gentle and kind, and he actually became close friends with both Spanky and Carl Switzer. Carl, who played his on-screen nemesis, even called him one of his best friends. Tommy later said they bonded because neither of us could replace the others. Our gang moved from Hal Roach Studios to Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer in 1938. Tommy remained with the group, and his final Our Gang short was Bubbling Troubles in 1940. Tommy avoided the heartache and troubles that plagued so many of his fellow child stars by preparing early for his future. He attended Los Angeles City College and later earned a degree in theater arts from Cal State Los Angeles in 1951. He served in the U.S. Navy during World War II, and after his discharge, he returned to Hollywood as a good-looking young man who was hardly recognizable as Butch. He appeared in two Gas House Kids movies alongside his old friend Carl Switzer, and in the late 1940s he became the first actor to portray cub reporter Jimmy Olsen in two Superman film serials, Superman in 1948 and Atom Man vs. Superman in 1950. In 1951, Tommy graduated from college and quit acting altogether, but he stayed in show business by working behind the cameras. He worked for over 2 decades as a stage manager and head of props at KTTV-TV in Los Angeles, and then spent another 2 decades as a stage manager and assistant director at KFSN-TV in Fresno. He worked with major industry figures like Norman Lear and George Schlatter, building a career that was stable, successful, and entirely his own. Tommy published his autobiography, Darn Right It's Butch, Memories of Our Gang, Little Rascals, in 1994 with the help of co-author Ron Giannini. He lived in the Fresno and Madera Ranchos area in his later years and served as a spokesman for our gang-related materials. He was happily married for 52 years to his wife Polly Bond, and together they had a son named Thomas R. Bond II. On September 24, 2005, Tommy Bond died at age 79 from complications of heart disease at Northridge Hospital in California. He left behind a great legacy built on 73 films, a charter membership in the Screen Actors Guild, and a life that proved child stardom didn't have to end in tragedy. Number 13. Darwood Waldo Kaye. Waldo Darwood Kaye was discovered in 1935 while his family was on vacation in Hollywood, California. His father listed him with central casting, and soon Darwood was called in for a screen test. He made some uncredited appearances in films in 1936, and then in 1937, Hal Roach cast him in the Our Gang comedy Glove Taps. His first speaking part came later that year in Hearts Are Thumps, and right then, a character was born. This was Waldo, the bookish rich kid with an officious, studious nature who competed with Alfalfa and Butch for Darla's affections. Darwood appeared in 21 Our Gang shorts between 1937 and 1940. Waldo was the kid who quoted poetry, used elevated vocabulary, and wore spectacles that made him look perpetually serious. He was snooty, pompous, and utterly convinced of his own sophistication, which made him the perfect comic foil for the rest of the gang. A 1940 Fort Worth Star-Telegram article noted that Darwood displayed the most essential characteristics of actors in that he was not affected by the constantly unsympathetic role he played. Off-screen, though, he was recognized as just a regular kid with good manners and none of Waldo's pretension. Darwood remained with our gang through 1940, by which time production had moved from Hal Roach Studios to Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. He also performed in live stage shows with other cast members, and according to Variety, he and Carl Switzer performed an eccentric tap routine in San Antonio in late December 1940 that registered well for laughs and applause. After leaving our gang, Darwood appeared in a handful of feature films, including Best Foot Forward in 1943, but he retired from acting in his teens. Darwood joined the Army in 1944, and after his service, he made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He converted to the Seventh-day Adventist faith and became a minister. He earned a master's degree in ministry from Michigan State University and was ordained as a pastor in 1952. In 1957, he and his wife Jean moved to Thailand, where he worked as a missionary for 14 years. Their fourth son, Donald, was born in Bangkok in 1960, and then the family returned to the United States permanently in the early 1970s. Darwood continued his pastoral work in Southern California, ministering at several churches and supervising missionary efforts. Darwood changed his name professionally, going by Pastor Ken Smith to avoid any association with his Hollywood past. He and Jean celebrated 50 years of marriage, and all 4 of their sons became Adventist pastors. His second son, David, later wrote a biography titled Finding Waldo, From Little Rascal to Seventh-day Adventist Pastor, published by Pacific Press in 2009. On May 15, 2002, Darwood was taking his daily walk along Arlington Avenue in Riverside, California, when a small tan truck veered onto the sidewalk and struck him. The driver fled the scene. Darwood was rushed to Riverside Community Hospital with severe head injuries, and later that evening, surrounded by his 4 sons, his wife Jean, and other relatives, he died. He was 72 years old, just 1 month shy of celebrating his 51st wedding anniversary. The hit-and-run driver was never identified or arrested. Darwood Waldo Kaye was buried at Crestlawn Memorial Park in Riverside. He left behind a legacy that had nothing to do with Hollywood and everything to do with faith, family, and a life lived to something larger than fame. Number 14 Robert Blake, Mickey Robert Blake, was born Michael James Gubitosi in Nutley, New Jersey, on September 18, 1933. His parents were Italian immigrants who performed as a song and dance team, and by 1936, their 3 children were billed as the 3 Little Hillbillies. The family moved to Los Angeles in 1938, where the kids started out working as movie extras, and Michael, who was the youngest, actually ended up being the most successful of the trio. He appeared in his very first film, Bride All Sweet, in 1939 under the name Mickey Gubatsi, and that exact same year he joined our gang. Mickey appeared in 40 Our Gang shorts between 1939 and 1944, replacing Eugene Porky Lee and eventually becoming the final lead character for the entire series. His character, Mickey, was often called upon to cry on screen, which was a skill he was actually criticized for because people found it unconvincing. Some reviewers even described him as obnoxious and whiny, but he stuck with the series until MGM completely discontinued production in 1944 with the short Dancing Romeo. Back in 1942, he picked up the stage name Bobby Blake and starred in the MGM feature Moki, playing the title role right opposite Donna Reed. After Our Gang came to an end, Bobby Blake appeared in 23 Red Ryder Western films as Little Beaver from 1944 to 1947. He also snagged roles in The Big Noise with Laurel and Hardy, Humoresque, and The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, where he played the Mexican boy who sells Humphrey Bogart a winning lottery ticket. He worked steadily all through the 1940s and 1950s, building a solid career that extended far beyond his childhood days. Blake's adult breakthrough finally came in 1967 when he portrayed convicted killer Perry Smith in Cold Blood, delivering a performance so intense it signaled a powerful second act for his career. Then in the 1970s, he became a total household name as the street-smart detective Tony Beretta in the ABC series Beretta, which ran from 1975 to 1978. He even won an Emmy Award for Best Actor in a Drama Series at the end of that first season, and much later down the road, he appeared as the mystery man in David Lynch's Lost Highway in 1997. Blake spoke very openly about having a deeply abusive childhood, claiming he was physically and sexually abused by both of his parents, often being locked away in closets and forced to eat right off the floor as a punishment. His father tragically committed suicide in 1955 at the age of 48. Blake went on to marry 3 times, with his first marriage to Sandra Kerr lasting from 1964 to 1983 and producing 2 children, while his third marriage to Bonnie Lee Bakley in 2000 lasted less than a single year. On May 4, 2001, Bonnie Lee Bakley was found shot to death inside Blake's car right outside a restaurant in Studio City, California. Blake claimed he had gone back in the restaurant to retrieve a gun he accidentally left behind and found her dead the moment he came back out. He was arrested and officially charged with her murder in 2002. The trial quickly turned into a massive media sensation, and in March 2005, Blake was fully acquitted of murder in criminal court. However, in November 2005, a civil jury found him liable for her wrongful death and ordered him to pay millions of dollars in damages. Robert Blake passed away on March 9, 2023, at the age of 89. His net worth at the time of his passing was estimated at around $3 million, leaving behind a massive career that spanned 8 decades, an Emmy Award, and a legacy that will forever remain complicated by tragedy, controversy, and a murder trial that completely defined his final years. Number 15. William Froggy Laughlin. Froggy William Froggy Laughlin was born on July 5, 1932 in San Gabriel, California. His mother actually enrolled him in a dramatic class to help him overcome his self-consciousness about his crossed eyes and thick glasses. Through that work, young Billy discovered he could do voices, including an impersonation of Popeye that would change his life forever. One day, an MGM talent scout visited the acting school and heard Billy's Popeye voice, so he arranged for him to audition for our gang. He was hired to play a character named Froggy, and his distinctive guttural voice quickly became the character's trademark. Billy appeared in every single Our Gang short from his debut in The New Pupil on April 27, 1940, until the series ended in 1944 with Dancing Romeo. He appeared in 29 shorts total, never missing a single film during his 4-year tenure. Froggy was the bespectacled kid with the gravel voice that sounded half Popeye and half Kermit the Frog, and he quickly became one of the most popular characters in the series. He even had the honor of speaking the last line in the final Our Gang short ever produced. Billy did the voice entirely himself without dubbing, though some fans theorized otherwise, because it seemed impossible that such a sound could come from a child. In one short called 1, 2, 3, Go, he used his real voice as a gag, proving that the Froggy voice was indeed his own creation. He was a genuinely talented performer, and his character often sang or delivered impromptu comedy routines, with his friends encouraging him to perform no matter how inappropriate the location. When our gang stopped production in 1944, Billy appeared in one final film, which was a cameo in Monogram's Johnny Doesn't Live Here Anymore, speaking in his natural voice for the only time on film. After that, he voluntarily moved away from show business and enjoyed a relatively peaceful teenage life. He attended high school, did well in his classes, and seemed to be adjusting perfectly to life outside Hollywood. His older brother Tom later said he was just a normal kid when the accident occurred. On August 31st, 1948, 16-year-old Billy was delivering newspapers with his friend John Wilbrand, who was driving a Cushman motor scooter. Billy was riding along as the passenger. They were riding down Valley Boulevard between 7th and 8th in La Puente, California, when Wilbrand made a sudden U-turn right into oncoming traffic. A truck driven by Paul Otto Baumann struck the scooter, throwing Billy 40 feet down the center of the highway. Wilbrand survived with minor injuries, but Billy was rushed to Covina Hospital with severe injuries. William Froggy Laughlin died at the hospital 6 hours later. He was only 16 years old, making him the youngest former Our Gang member to die. Tragically, the scooter had been a gift from his parents just 2 weeks earlier. No charges were filed against the truck driver, who claimed he was simply unable to stop in time. Billy was buried at Rose Hills Memorial Park Cemetery in Whittier, California, right next to his parents. He left behind a voice that generations would remember, a character that defined the final years of Our Gang, and a life cut impossibly short before it had truly begun. Our Gang premiered in 1922 and ran for over 2 decades, producing 220 talking shorts before closing its doors in 1944. But the door never fully closed, did it? The series lived on in syndication and reunion films, staying alive in the memories of everyone who ever sat in front of a television and felt, just for a moment, that childhood could last forever. Most of the people who built that world are gone now. Norman Cheney, Scotty Beckett, Carl Switzer, Darla Hood, Billy Thomas, Eugene Lee, Tommy Bond, Darwood Kaye, Robert Blake, and William Laughlin. Each departure arrived with its own quiet weight, serving as a gentle reminder that the people behind the laughter were human and mortal, just like the rest of us. What Our Gang gave its audience was never about realism, but something much rarer. It was a vision of childhood where friendship really mattered, where problems could actually be solved, and where laughter was the entire point. That vision mattered back in 1922, and honestly, it matters still.